According to General Hospital teasers, Vaughn and Jocelyn Jacks had a fascinating talk last week, during which he promised to one day tell her why he decided to become a WSB agent. Is it to retaliate against Jason Morgan, his real father? As their perilous missions drew them closer together, Joss and her WSB sidekick continued to bond and share kisses over the week of June 30th to July 4th. At this point, Joss acknowledged that her true motivation for becoming a super spy was retaliation. Joss clarified that her only goal was to defeat Sonny Corinthos, which is strange because it appeared that she abandoned this notion. After all, both Donna and Avery Corinthos would be devastated if Sonny was imprisoned. Nevertheless, for whatever reason, GH is resuming this plot, and Vaughn assured Joss that he would eventually explain to her why he joined the WSB after she came clean. This indicates that Vaughn may harbor a certain amount of animosity for criminals, and that a significant event in his life has influenced him to pursue taking down all the bad guys. However, why? Fans are aware that newcomers frequently have unidentified familial ties in any soap opera town. Cody Bell and Sasha Corbin's recent discovery that they are both members of the Scorpio family are excellent instances of how no one is left behind without some PC origins. In relation to that, GH enjoys rewriting history. This raises the possibility that Vaughn is Jason's long-lost son for GH watchers. Vaughn may share Joss's resentment of Sonny and desire to destroy him. What happens if he is aware that Jason is his dad? Does he struggle with abandonment when it comes to Jason? Although it's unlikely that Jason is aware that he has a son, it's still possible that he had a one-night stand with a woman in town or possibly while on vacation, and that lady became pregnant without telling Jason. A fictitious relationship with a former character is conceivable, nevertheless. The whole Gio Palmieri plot, in which Brooklyn Quartermaine Chase and Dante Falconeri hook up at camp, is another example that GH viewers may cite. Jason's sperm might have been stolen if Vaughn's mother was sufficiently fixated with the mob henchman, depending on who she is. GH might develop a plot around Vaughn being Jason's biological son in a variety of ways. Vaughn may feel resentful of Jason and want retribution for a number of reasons. Perhaps his mother was lying when she claimed that Jason was aware of him and didn't want to interact with him since he put his career above his son. Another possibility is that she was truthful when she told Vaughn that she kept him away from Jason due to his risky professional decision. In any case, this might have led to a great deal of hostility against Jason and Vaughn's desire to destroy his biological father at whatever chance he got. According to General Hospital spoilers, Vaughn is surrounded by a great deal of mystery and is undoubtedly related to Port Charles in some way. However, who is he related to, and is it Jason Morgan? Fans are wondering if Jason Morgan's greatest fear is coming. According to General Hospital spoilers, will Stone Cold's world be rocked by a Danny Morgan twist? Although Jen Sidwell was responsible for the Charlie's pub attack, Christina Corinthos Davis was not intended to be inside when it caught fire. Since the fire was only supposed to proceed when the area was vacant, Sidwell was actually extremely upset with his poorly executed orders. But what's done is done, and Sonny Corinthos is furious now that his little daughter is in danger. As a result, GH fans will soon witness Sonny take some retaliatory action against Sidwell. Naturally, Sidwell could not have predicted that Marco Rios would become involved in all of this drama and ride to Christina's aid. However, Marco did just that, and now wary Sonny is prepared to allow Marco to become collateral damage in his growing conflict with Sidwell. Sidwell will be furious as ever if Marco ends up in danger as a result of Sonny. Sidwell might target both Sonny and Jason's kids if they cross that line. Since Jason is Sonny's right-hand man, he will play a significant role in executing any plans for retaliation against Sidwell. Sidwell might descend to a darker level as a result, which could endanger Danny. The decisions Jason made as a father and the fact that he is now Danny's lone parent after Sam McCall passed away have received a lot of attention. Jason might not be able to stop what is starting, but he would never be able to forgive himself if he allowed Danny to suffer a horrible fate. Sonny and Sidwell's animosity will only worsen due to the chaos caused by the bar fire, and the rumors circulating regarding Natalia Ramirez's actual cause of death. Jason will end up in the center of everything, which could put Danny in a dangerous scenario. Could all the Sidwell mayhem result in Danny being abducted or gravely hurt? Fans of GH are becoming increasingly alarmed that Jason's greatest fear might be imminent, so keep checking back for any shocking Danny-related news. According to General Hospital previews, Jason would stop at nothing to keep Sonny's family safe, but he had better keep an eye on his own son as well. According to General Hospital spoilers, Cody Bell appears ready to plant a kiss on Ava Jerome. However, will this lip lock be genuine or only a ploy by Christina Corinthos Davis? Fans of GH are aware that when Cody signed up for this, he fought for hazard pay since he was initially concerned about Ava's troubling past. But it seems like Cody is beginning to see Ava's side, and might even be enjoying her company. It goes without saying that Cody still has feelings for Molly Lansing Davis and their relationship. In fact, Max Scorpio will play Cupid for the two in the upcoming weeks after noticing their bond. However, Cody has committed to this Ava plot and might keep trying to woo her. That might jeopardize Cody's developing relationship with Molly, particularly if the distinction between what is real and what is part of the story is beginning to become hazy. According to General Hospital spoilers, Ava and Cody are about to have a heated exchange. A sequence that draws Cody and Ava closer will occur sometime in July. Is it possible that Ava and Cody will go close enough to share a kiss? Ava and Cody might give in to a kiss, but Cody might experience some internal conflict as a result. There might be more going on here. Even though Cody might convince himself it's only a portion of the task Christina assigned him. It's possible that Cody secretly wants to kiss Ava, and may find it difficult to move on from her thereafter. Stories with a seduction narrative like this one often get complicated and lead to genuine emotions, which may be what's going on with Cody. Regretfully, Cody might come to regret his engagement with Ava altogether. Ava might become enraged with Cody after learning that he is working for Christina, in addition to perhaps destroying their relationship with Molly. According to General Hospital spoilers, Ava will eventually receive news, so don't miss her furious response and the mayhem it may cause. On Monday, July 7, 2025, General Hospital spoilers will be released. Fans should anticipate a terrifying revelation from Sasha Gilmore Corbin. As Anna Devane questions Jen Sidwell, he engages in blame shifting. Let's discuss the upcoming developments in the ABC soap drama as you continue reading. Jen Sidwell's accusation. First, let's talk about Sidwell, who is currently engaged in a mob battle with Sonny Corinthos. Innocent individuals will be caught in the crossfire as the two retaliate against one another. In addition to the fire that almost killed Christina Corinthos Davis, there is the death of Natalia Ramirez. Sidwell loses his temper as Anna approaches him to ask him some questions. Sidwell orders the police commissioner to go speak with Sonny in an abrasive manner. Laura Collins and Sonny are meeting in the interim. The mob boss informs the mayor that he might have a method to limit the damage in a sneak peek at the upcoming episode. The confrontation of Rocco Falconeri. According to General Hospital teasers for Monday, July 7th, Lulu Spencer is confronted by Rocco Falconeri. The adolescent asks his mother about Britt Westbourne's surrogacy dilemma. Britt's homecoming seems more likely to be a flashback to Rocco's major plot point. Following the altercation, Lulu will be furious. She will undoubtedly direct her attention toward Brooke Lynn Quartermaine. In reference to her conflict with Lulu, BLQ informs Cody Bell that one of them must be the bigger person. The brunette will most likely deny any involvement in the information being shared when Lulu attacks BLQ. Lulu is the kind of person who would manage to extract it from Marco Rios. Marco won't be performing at his best because he is still suffering the loss of his mother. July 7, 2025, Monday. Additionally, fans will witness Sasha's terrifying discovery. Does Daisy Gilmore Corbin have anything to do with this? Let's watch how this plot develops as someone is playing with Sasha's thoughts and her unborn child. In fact, I'm shocked that Cody didn't volunteer to look in the baby's room as a precaution. Giovanni Giopalmieri is looking for a fresh viewpoint. Gio will speak with Carly Spencer as well. Jocelyn Jacks also informs VAUGHN that they are finished. On Monday, July 7, 2025, which narrative are you most excited to see? Post your ideas in the space provided for comments below. To find out what happens next, keep watching the ABC soap opera. VAUGHN had always been a mystery, sometimes to himself and sometimes to those around him. His sense of self had always been tattered at the edges. Having been raised in the shadow of secrets he was unaware existed. Because there were large portions of his past that he didn't comprehend, he wasn't one to discuss it much. He was raised to believe that his father had perished in an off-the-grid military operation. For a time, that story had been sufficient. However, as he grew older, he realized the lies were too flawless. When he asked questions, people winced. They provided prepared responses that were too polished to be authentic. And after a while, that facade broke. Everything changed when Vaughn found out. Jason Morgan, the legendary hitman turned hero from Port Charles, was more than simply a name from the headlines. He was the father of Vaughn. Not only in terms of biology, there were levels to it, intricate relationships that dated back years, covert decisions, and survival-related secrets. Vaughn was torn between feeling numb and enraged. He was initially neither. He was a void. From a distance, he observed Jason, examining him like a scientist might examine a hazardous specimen. What sort of man would leave his child behind and never return? However, that was also untrue. Despite his desire to paint Jason as a villain, the facts would not allow it. Jason was completely unaware of Vaughn's existence. That had been ensured by the woman who reared him, whom Vaughn had referred to as mother. Even though he didn't forgive her, Vaughn understood her motivations. Forgiveness, however, was not ingrained in him. He needed to face the legacy Jason had left behind, whether on purpose or not, in order to make meaning of his own life. He didn't initially arrive in Port Charles on that trip. It led him to locations Jason had abandoned. It led him to secret papers, former foes, and the name of an organization that was muttered to him, the WSB. There was more to the World Security Bureau than merely the government. It was a network of surveillance, control, and secrets. Vaughn regarded it as a chance to distinguish himself outside of Jason Morgan's long, shadowy shadow, not only to serve. However, there was another motivation hidden beneath that sense of patriotism. Vaughn sought clarification. And so be it if he had to earn them by deceit, missions, and loyalty to a power greater than himself. It was difficult to recruit him to the WSB. He didn't ask to be invited in by knocking on their door. He earned his reputation the hard way by taking on risky freelancing jobs, uncovering corruption, recovering private information, and expertly navigating criminal networks. Word got out. The WSB made selections rather than hiring. Additionally, they approached Vaughn with a test rather than a handshake. He died. Vaughn, now firmly established in their ranks, carried out tasks that were never reported on. His areas of expertise were betrayals, infiltrations, and silent warfare. However, Jason's name followed him like a ghost as he rose through the ranks. Others discussed it in whispers, tying together what they believed to be long-buried details. Some even proposed that Vaughn's ascent might have been indirectly facilitated by Jason's own shaky and fragmented past with the WSB. That was something Vaughn detested. Hate that every achievement, every secret triumph, could be ascribed to heredity rather than hard work. His animosity was not, however, outright hostility. It was simply too simple. The fact that Vaughn had a desire to comprehend Jason just made it worse. To discover whether a man was hiding behind the myth. He experienced mixed feelings with each file he extracted and each task that drew him closer to Port Charles. Vaughn spent years looking for an identity that was never given to him, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to see Jason, confront him, or hold him accountable. Then the shift began. Once more, and more than usual, the WSB began to take an interest in Port Charles. Operatives as well as surveillance. Vaughn recognized the symptoms. There was a building, and Jason's name was inscribed on it, whatever it was. Vaughn made the transfer request at that point. It wasn't official. It wasn't necessary. He'd earned enough credit to operate with near autonomy. No one questioned his request. On the contrary, it was embraced. Vaughn was a calming presence in the chaotic center of Port Charles. Vaughn was unable to fully acknowledge to himself that his involvement was not merely professional, which is what the WSB was unaware of. He had to meet Jason in person. However, Vaughn wasn't welcomed in Port Charles. Not quite yet. He entered covertly, assumed a false identity, took rooms while observing and listening. Jason had returned, but he was a different person. He had transformed in prison. Reaching him has become more difficult with time. That just inflamed Vaughn's inner passion. He didn't know what he was expecting, guilt, sorrow, or perhaps even recognition, but Jason didn't give it to him. Since Jason was still unaware of Vaughn's true identity, Vaughn wasn't prepared to tell him either. Rather, he hovered around the periphery, collecting intelligence and monitoring players. He had studied the names of Sonny Corinthos, Carly Spencer, and Anna Devane in briefings, and now they were in front of him in vivid color. How many of them were aware of Jason's past, he wondered. About his decisions that affected others decades later. Vaughn didn't think they were aware of him. That was excellent. He wasn't prepared to be just another plot point in their continuing tale. However, the situation quickly became unstable. Vaughn's assignment developed into something more complex, and the WSB had ideas. Former agents who aspired to change the Bureau's mission through aggressive surveillance, bioweapons development, and control over local power structures were part of a rogue party that had infiltrated the agency. And now, whether he wanted it or not, Jason was getting drawn into it all. Vaughn's goal changed. Look into the threat, eliminate it, and use Jason to entice the adversaries out into the open if needed. It was the perfect storm, and it was aimed at Vaughn. The impact of being in Port Charles on him was something he hadn't anticipated. Observing the locations Jason visited, those who battled for him loathed him and loved him. Vaughn started to view Jason as a man, flawed, conflicted, capable of both loyalty and destruction, rather than as a representation of everything he had lost. Although it caused him to pause, Vaughn did not forgive him. The night of the first actual conflict then arrived. First, it wasn't dramatic. Jason followed Vaughn after noticing that he was following one of Sonny's associates. Tension was in the air when they found themselves face to face in an alley. Actually, Jason didn't recognize him. He perceived danger. Vaughn noticed an asterisk. Although they weren't, guns may have been drawn. What stopped them was silence, a beat too long, a spark of something in Jason's eyes like déjà vu. It was as though he was looking at a reflection of a choice he had made in the past but had forgotten. Vaughn remained silent. He disappeared into the darkness. However, the fuse was ignited. The layers then started to come off more quickly. Anna began to inquire. Carly had an uneasy feeling. Unaware of who he was dealing with, Drew, ever the opportunist, attempted to exploit Vaughn to push his way deeper into the WSB's hallways. Then there was Sam. She discovered a file that Vaughn had viewed, which was long hidden behind redactions and having to do with Jason's first missions for the WSB. Although she was aware that it wasn't customary, she didn't know why Vaughn was observing them. Vaughn's cover started to come apart, but he persisted in pushing. The rogue party within the WSB took a risk by putting monitoring software in the PCPD mainframe, releasing false information, and kidnapping a local tech prodigy. Vaughn skillfully rebutted everything. But he was getting closer to a truth he wasn't entirely sure he wanted with every victory. He was no longer merely pursuing ghosts. He was joining the narrative that he had once aimed to dismantle. When Jason was abducted, by renegade agents masquerading as Bureau employees, it was the last straw. Vaughn was aware of their destination. He had the floor plans, the coordinates, and the access codes. However, entering would expose him to Jason as well as the WSB. He had disliked and dreaded the man's legacy. Still he went. The rescue was quick, violent, and effective. Like a man under a spell, Vaughn sliced through his adversaries. Bloodied and bewildered, Jason saw him at work. Only when the dust had settled did they speak. "You're WSB?" Jason asked in a raspy voice. "I am many things," Vaughn answered. Jason narrowed his eyes and nodded slowly. "You have been pursuing me." "Yes." "Why?" After hesitating, Vaughn responded with a heft that broke the tension between them. "Since I am your son." The ensuing quiet wasn't tranquil. Its implications were violent, loud, and cracking. Jason remained still. Didn't take a breath. Vaughn waited. The past and present met head-on in that instant. Jason was no longer merely a file name. He was made of flesh and bone. A man who, like Vaughn, had been deceived. Both of them had invisible scars, but they were aware of their locations. And something else arrived even though forgiveness didn't come at that very moment. Recognition. Reconciliation was not what Vaughn anticipated. He didn't come for that reason. He came to face, comprehend, and demolish Jason Morgan's myth in order to uncover what was left behind. He had to. He discovered neither a hero nor a villain. Only a man. Following his unofficial rescue, Vaughn stayed in Port Charles for several weeks while his WSB clearance was being reviewed. He didn't care though. His mission was accomplished. The one that mattered, not the one that was written down. He had to confront reality. And now, without Jason or perhaps with him, he could be able to choose who he was. Vaughn left the others of Port Charles unsure on how to react. He was viewed as a menace by some. Others saw possibilities. One thing was certain though. He was not going anywhere. Not unless he decided to. Gunfights, betrayals, disappearances, and even death itself were all things Jason Morgan had experienced, but nothing could have prepared him for what lay ahead. He had encountered adversaries from all throughout Port Charles, but this time there was no outside threat. It was so intimate. It would rock him to his very core, jar his renowned poise, and reveal the one weakness he had always attempted to hide. His son Danny. Jason had only started readjusting to his life's routine. Everyone who had mourned him had been shocked by his reappearance to Port Charles after he had been thought dead for years. Carly, Sonny, and Sam were among the people he had bonded with, but nothing had been simple. Rebuilding trust was necessary. People's lives had changed. Both he and the people he used to know had changed. Jason, however, remained steadfast in his resolve to reestablish contact with his kids, particularly Danny, in spite of the chaos. The young boy Jason had left behind was no longer Danny. He was older now, more confused, more aloof, and more angry. The years of not being there had worn them down. Danny had questions that no one could answer, at least not in the same manner as Jason could, despite Sam's attempts to fill the hole and Drew's attempts to be involved in his life. However, the timing of Jason's comeback has further complicated matters. The young guy was just beginning to define himself when Jason abruptly returned, bringing with him mental anguish for which he was unprepared. Jason made an effort to wait. He attended school functions, made small talk, and showed consideration for Danny's personal space. However, every encounter was tense. Danny regarded him as though he were a ghost, someone who had risen from the grave but had not merited the opportunity to be there. Every cold shoulder and every comment hurt Jason more than any bullet wound he had ever experienced. But when Jason began to see actual changes in Danny's conduct, that's when the real nightmare started. He initially believed it to be the normal disobedience of a teenager, particularly one who had experienced what Danny had. However, Sam then started to voice his own worries. In addition to fighting at school and going out late at night, Danny had been hanging with some dubious individuals who had connections to the criminal underground. Danny was going into a downward spiral. It wasn't just teenage disobedience. In order to keep an eye on his own son without giving him away, Jason started to dig covertly, utilizing contacts from his previous life. The truth grew more unsettling the more he discovered. Danny was in the thick of things, not just teasing danger. There were rumors that he was hanging out with a street-level enforcer who was connected to one of Sonny's old adversaries. Rumors circulated about illicit gambling, drug use, and even small-time larceny. Even if Jason didn't want to accept it, there was no denying the proof. Even worse, Jason was being accused of abandoning by the boy he had once held in his arms, whose safety had kept him awake at night, even when he was hiding from the outside world. Apologies were not what Danny wanted. He was not interested in explanations. For the years he'd felt like a ghost in his own house, watching Sam mourn a man who had put the mob above fatherhood. He wanted retribution. Jason made every effort to get in touch with him. He attempted to persuade Danny to open up over burgers at Kelly's, took him on drives, and even recruited Carly's assistance because he knew that her direct manner may cause Danny's armor to come off. However, nothing was effective. Danny was excluding everyone, and the only words he appeared to hear were those that drew him farther into the darkness. Then followed the unexpected turn of events that would completely upend Jason's world. Jason received explosive information from a private source inside the company Danny had been teasing. Danny wasn't simply surrounded by the wrong crowd. For them, he was actively employed. Doing errands, delivering communications, pretending to be a courier. Even worse, he was doing it voluntarily. Sam was appalled, but she was also reluctant to believe it when Jason confronted her right away. Not Danny. Not their son. However, they were directly confronted by the proof. Surveillance images. Text messages. Danny setting up a drop, partially recorded. When Sam realized that the boy they had previously defended with their lives was now entering the very world they had attempted to keep him from, he started crying. It was a sad realization for Jason. There was more to this than rebellion. It was a proclamation. Danny was attempting to become someone he believed Jason admired, not just acting out. A soldier. A devoted disciple. A nighttime ghost who carried out necessary tasks at any cost. Everything Jason had ever stood for had been misinterpreted by Danny. Jason had chosen to live in the background so that his kids wouldn't have to. In order for them to grow up free from the mob, he had made every sacrifice, every lie, and every difficult decision. However, Danny was now pursuing the very darkness Jason had made such a concerted effort to protect him from. It was the worst nightmare ever. The worst part was that Jason was unable to use a threat or a gun to solve it. He had to become a father in a way he had never experienced before. Emotionally honest, vulnerable, and exposed. Jason took a chance and went straight to Danny because he was desperate to get to his son before it was too late. He didn't act like the stoic protector this time. He never gave ultimatums or yelled commands. Rather, he was honest with Danny about his shortcomings, remorse, and desire to be a part of his life once more. He explained to him that being separated from his own child was more difficult than any bullet he had ever endured. Danny's gaze remained icy as he listened. He wasn't prepared to pardon. Perhaps he would never be. However, something about Jason's calm, sincere, and painful speech struck a chord with the boy. He didn't leave abruptly. He didn't shout. Jason had no idea if he had reached him since he just walked away. As the days went by, Jason remained distant and allowed Danny to approach him. The call that would alter everything then arrived. Danny had been taken into custody. He was apprehended during a sting operation designed to apprehend intermediate-level narcotics traffickers. Fearing the worst, Jason hurried to the precinct, his pulse racing. However, he was shocked by what he discovered. Indeed, Danny had been apprehended, but not for dealing. He had lost it. He had come forward and consented to cooperate hours before the sting, providing the cops with just enough information to apprehend the others he had been running with. It was careless. It was risky. However, it was also a sign. A valiant, desperate attempt to escape while he was still able. Jason exerted every effort to shield Danny from potential legal repercussions. Sam was also present, and despite their limited communication, their affection for their kid united them. Danny was ultimately enrolled in a diversion program that included required community service, counseling, and frequent check-ins. Although it wasn't a way out of jail, it was a lifeline. The path to recovery was rocky and protracted. Danny was defensive and furious. He first blamed himself, then Jason, and finally the entire world. But slowly, as the weeks stretched into months, something changed. Counseling was beneficial. Structure was helpful. Above all, however, Jason's presence was helpful. Not the policeman. Not icy cold. Only Jason, the parent who was at last there, at last making an effort. They began getting together once a week, sometimes at Kelly's, sometimes at the gym, and occasionally simply for a stroll in the park. They avoided discussing the past. They discussed the future, girlfriends, and music. Jason did not press. He simply listened. And Danny started to release his rage bit by bit. But the scars were still there. The years he was gone were irrevocable for Jason. He was unable to take away Danny's dread, or the decisions he had made in an attempt to feel strong in a world that made him feel helpless. What he could do, however, was to support his son at every turn. After a while, Danny revealed why he had veered so far off course. He claimed that he needed to feel a connection to his father, anything at all. He reasoned that if he were like Jason, he may at last get why his father left and why he made the decisions he did. It might fill the void, he reasoned. Jason didn't know everything. However, he assured Danny that he would never again have to doubt his significance. Jason had no intention of leaving. The road wasn't always easy even back then. There were disagreements, outbursts of rage, and relapses. Danny continued to push people away at times. However, the foundation was now in place. A delicate, priceless trust that was starting to recover. Throughout his life, Jason encountered numerous adversaries, but none ever left him as raw, unsettled, or resolute as the battle to save his kid. Although he would always be burdened by his history, he now had reasons to hope for a better future, one in which Danny would be able to overcome the darkness, not because he emulated Jason, but rather because he had learned to forge his own way. Jason discovered something he hadn't experienced in years: hope, throughout that imperfect, agonizing, and genuine trip.